elected leaders and town officials and staff who are here. I see several people. I made notes. I hope I've captured everyone. First and foremost, Kate Stewart, our mayor, Casey Kostick, the city council representative from Ward 3, Peter Kovar from my own Ward 1, who has told me he changed his schedule to be here, so he's going to have to take off at 8. Roz Grigsby, community development manager. Will Smith was hoping to be here. I think he hasn't made it. Our comptroller, Peter Francho. Where are you, Peter? There you are in the back. Thank you for being here. Kathleen. Oh, Cindy. Cindy DeVello, thank you so much. I didn't see you, Cindy. Thank you for being here. Ward 2. And we have Kathleen Mitchell representing Hans Reamer, who's the president and at-large rep of the Montgomery County Council. And then we're also very pleased to have a good contingent from the fire company. So thank you so much for your hospitality. We've got Chief Tom Musgrove, President Elmer Ham, Rusty, right? And also the former chief. Former Chief Jarbo's here. A huge hand, let's do a bigger round of applause for our rescue personnel. So tonight's program was organized by this group, Community Vision for Takoma Junction. We are really a swarm. We have a list of about 1,000 people now who have been organizing for the last few years to support community-centered development at the junction, working for a development that's at the right scale, that will support and strengthen our walkable grocery store, that will create opportunities for locally owned businesses, and enhance pedestrian, biker, transit rider safety. So tonight's meeting is really about the transportation issues related to the development. And we have been talking about these issues for many years, and we felt there was a need at this juncture to really be heard. And we are so grateful to have 3 representatives from State Highway Administration with us. So particularly want to introduce State Highway Administrator Greg Slater, who has now, I think, 18 or 19 years of experience in SHA as an engineer and a planner and fiscal manager. We also have Brian Young, who is senior engineer for the region, and we also have Derek Gunn, who is a traffic engineer. And so their role tonight will be to listen, to take some notes, to hear the concerns. We're not having any decisions. They're not really responding, although I've invited the administrator to say a few words to clarify what they are able to do and what they're not able to do. And I just want to thank you. It's a big deal that you're here, and just a huge round of applause.
Thank you so much. Let me just say that we're really happy to be here. We're always pleased to be out in the community and talking to communities like Takoma Park. I'm going to say a few words, a little bit about kind of what our role is and what our role isn't. But as part of a development process, as part of a community visioning process like this, we come in and the developer will give us what's called a TIS, an impact study. And then we review that, because what our role is to maintain the safety and operations of all of the users of the network as the development proceeds. So part of that process is for all of us to understand not only the perspectives from what's coming in, but the perspectives from the community, so that we can understand all the different viewpoints when we make our decisions. Oftentimes we come back with options and look at different options so that we can make sure that we're keeping the integrity of the system at the forefront of our mind. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you. So I just want to define the process for tonight, and then we're just going to jump right in. I know everybody's busy. Thank you again so much for being here, for caring so much that you're here. And it was a huge number of people who made this happen, so thanks to the crew. We are going to start. We've asked a couple of people, most notably Sue Katz-Miller, to open with kind of an overview of the broad issues around pedestrian, biker safety, the flow of traffic, this sort of junction that's full of intersections. So Sue will open up. I'm actually going to follow with just a few photos, which are largely the ones that you see on the wall, and a couple of videos. That'll be short. And then we have a sign-up list. We have several people who've signed up. Each person has 3 minutes. We're going to be pretty brutal about cutting you off with a noisemaker and see how many people we can get through. And really, we'll wrap up pretty promptly around 8:30. So with that, we'll get started. I will need that sign-up sheet so we can call. We'll give you a heads up if you're next in line to speak. And so I want to introduce, also I just want to say, I'm turning the mic over in 2 seconds to Nadine Block, who is well known to all of you as a master facilitator and manager of groups. I don't expect the need for a lot of management tonight, but Nadine will be facilitating and keeping things moving. So we'll start with Sue. And if you still want to sign up to speak, just pop on up here to the side table and put your name on the piece of paper. But we have quite a few people. So, and when you speak, you'll come to one of the side mics. Okay. We are filming also, where we're going to capture the whole evening.
My name is Sue Katz-Miller. Thank you for coming out to listen to our community. I'm here as a neighbor who walks or drives through the junction every day, and I'm here as a former elementary school PTA president. For more than a decade, my children had to cross the junction twice a day to school and back. They would sometimes text me to say that they were stopping at the co-op for a snack, and I would feel a sense of relief that they had successfully navigated over to our side of the junction. Crossing the junction with cars coming in from 5 directions has never felt safe. Walkers, bikers, and drivers all endure bizarrely long waits and grow frustrated. Pedestrians make a dash against a light, drivers pull out around a bus. It's extremely difficult now to enter or exit the city lot at rush hour, and when a fire truck has to get in or out, the whole junction freezes, increasing the bad human behavior. Over the years, we've been told the gridlock can be fixed if we could just get the timing on the lights done right. But presumably, if it were that easy, it would be done by now. Tonight, we're here to consider what will happen to the regular gridlock, increasing traffic and hazardous conditions at this intersection if we build the proposed new development. The development would attract new drivers to a 72-car underground parking garage with an entrance and exit into the center of the junction. It would increase delivery and garbage and recycling trucks to service the new development, and it would move the loading zone, currently at the back of the lot, to a lay-by on the side of the state highway in the middle of the junction. As a community, we don't see how the traffic can withstand these additional stressors. We don't see how rescue vehicles will be able to get safely and quickly out and through. We don't see where trucks will safely wait if they arrive and the lay-by is occupied. We don't see what will stop cars and delivery trucks from speeding through our residential streets, including the terrifying blind curves on Columbia Avenue, in order to try to avoid the junction. And we don't see how it could be safe for children or the elderly or bikers to cross the new garage ramp or cross in front of or behind trucks unloading at the lay-by. As a community, we've been expressing our alarm about these traffic and safety issues for years now. The first junction design submitted by the developer retained the off-street loading zone at the back of the lot, but once they were chosen, they moved the loading zone into the lay-by in order to maximize income. Tonight, you will only get to hear from 20 or so residents, but I want to assure you that my claim to represent the concerned majority is based on data. While city officials have characterized the community as evenly divided, we recently requested all emails to the city on this topic, and a clear majority wrote in to express concerns. Meanwhile, the city and the developer each promised a traffic study, but we will not even hear about those studies until apparently late April, just days before the city will vote on the development. After decades of trying to figure out how to fix the junction, the rush from traffic studies to construction approval is disturbing. So what are we asking for? We're asking you for detailed attention to the sight lines, heights of structures and vehicles, and walking and biking and driving patterns throughout the junction. We're asking for detailed attention to the safety of when and where and how new traffic will move in and out of the development, including cars and recycling and trash trucks and delivery trucks. We're asking for detailed attention to the plan for retaining or moving any or all of the crosswalks, traffic lights, bus stops, bike lanes, bike stations, poles, boxes, and signage. We're asking for you to have independent conversations with the firefighters, crossing guards, bus drivers, and truck drivers so that they feel safe to honestly report their experiences with current hazards and concerns about the lay-by and garage. In short, we're asking you to ensure that the junction becomes safer and more walkable and bikeable, not more hazardous. Help our city to understand that revitalizing this public land has to be built on a foundation of public safety first. Maximizing tax income cannot override safety concerns. And if that means starting over with a new process and a new plan, help us to have the courage to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. So we're going to just show a few photos now. And gentlemen, I might, in this one case, invite you to just stand to the side for a moment so you can see them, because really this is for you. I want to make sure you can see, and this won't be too long. And so in the last week, I'd actually never gone up and just sat at the junction, so I went up last week for about 45 minutes and sat at Spring Mill Bakery, and then I was over at the co-op. And then my neighbor on Valley View, Linda Carlson, decided she would do it, and she went up for about an hour. It wasn't any particular time. Mine was at 8:30. I'm not actually sure when Linda was up there. But these are our pictures, just from a kind of a random visit up. This is the first tour videos. Watch out for the bike. So this is right across from the co-op bus stop. We have cars bumping around that bus in the wrong way in traffic all the time. So here's the second one. These are cars coming from the junction to turn left on Carroll down towards the hospital, just to give you a feel for it. Okay, so that just gives you a flavor. And then we'll just run through these. These largely speak for themselves. In the morning, we have huge backup out to New Hampshire Avenue coming in. In the evening, we have huge backup on Carroll Avenue, almost back to Victory Towers in downtown Tacoma. This is a bicyclist. This is very important. We have blurred her face to protect her privacy. She just happened to be going by. She's in front of the co-op on the sidewalk because it's just not safe, and I think with the proposed plan, we're going to have a similar issue. This is a car coming out of Sycamore Avenue. And even though that white truck and all the ones behind it should be behind that light there, they're not. So the vehicles coming out of Sycamore turn into facing traffic. In fact, right here where the red is where the lay-by would be, or a little bit back from there. So, and there's a second car coming from Sycamore into Ethan Allen. This is a car coming out of the entrance of the co-op. So we can't control human behavior, and of course there is a lot of bad behavior. There's a lot of bad driving, pedestrian behavior, but I think it's exacerbated when people are tense, when they're backed up, when they can't get out. Next. We saw this recycling truck. There doesn't seem to be any plan for where the co-op will handle its trash and recycling. When I was up, there were 3 trucks unloading in this parking garage, so these 3 would have to go into the lay-by, which isn't really feasible. I don't know how we're going to work that out. So these are just pictures, and this was the last. I actually have this as a video, but this is a guy crossing while he shouldn't be doing this, but he's running to try to dash through, and there's a second as a car is coming, sort of racing across the intersection. There are multiple crosswalks and bus stops, and so that's the pictures. That's the story, and you all know it. Now, thank you so much for watching. We can turn this screen off, I think, so it won't be bothering people. Lots of risky spaces up there. So we're going to move to you, and I'll give everybody a 30-second notice, 10-second notice. I don't know how you want to do this.
Yeah. So I'll just say that, hi, I'm Nadine. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to try to keep us on time. The next couple people, and Betsy will help keep time and flash 30-second warnings at folks and 10-second warnings when you're up to your 3 minutes. This should sound like a city council meeting for those of you who've been there. So the next folks who are up are Roger Schlegel and Colleen Cordes are the next two people, and Rick Weiss is after that. And if anybody wants to sign in to speak, please do. All right. And there are two actual mics if you feel like you need a mic. One is on that side and one is on this side, and you could come on either one.
Hi, I'm Roger Schlegel. I just want to say I just found out this afternoon that I'd have a chance to talk, so I'm just speaking from notes. I live in the neighborhood to the south of the junction, and I've always joked that I don't really have a dog in the fight because I'm fairly far in terms of walking distance. I'm not going to be impacted by noise or traffic from this, but several years ago I chose to get involved with the Takoma Junction Task Force because I saw it as an issue that was going to be very important for our community, and I wanted to try to see if there's a harmonious outcome that we could get. And I was involved in lots of community outreach with some other members in many different neighborhoods and with many different stakeholders. And I spent a lot of time walking around the junction, observing, counting parking spots on street parking and in the area, watching the traffic. And so after watching the presentation last night, I wanted to share a few things that jumped out at me right away that are maybe fairly detailed, but I'm not sure if anybody else has had a chance to digest it and see these things yet, so I'll share them. First, I wanted to point out that the design calls for a driveway that is moved closer to the fire station. And I just pasted off, it's going to be 60 feet from the stop line for the westbound traffic on Carroll Avenue at Philadelphia. Now, what that means is that think about your left turns in and out of this new development. Your left turns in would be taking place just 60 feet shy of a stop line at a traffic light. So it's going to be very hard for people to turn left in. And when they get a shot at doing that, they're probably going to do what a lot of drivers do in the DC area. They're going to go for it. And they won't be looking at all the possible points of conflict in that moment when they turn left. And one of the huge points of conflict will be pedestrians, kids as young as 8 years old who move independently around our neighborhood on the sidewalks, on bicycles. And coinciding with that, just before the driveway is designated as the public area, public space that the developer wants to establish, which is going to be plantings and greenery, which will present a visibility problem for drivers turning left. It could mask the fact that someone's moving along quickly on the sidewalk. If you think about people trying to turn left out of that, so they're coming up out of that driveway and then trying to turn left towards Philadelphia Avenue, how are they going to, what are they going to be doing when there's traffic stopped at that light? And what kinds of risks will they take adding to the chaos that we already just saw? That's one of the big things that jumps out at me. I don't know, do I have one more minute?
Can we get back on the list?
There's a, yeah, jump on later. The developer wants to have a sidewalk that bends right at that point where there's a setback to the building to create this public space. That's going to create conflict between cyclists who use the sidewalk because the street seems too hazardous and pedestrians. And the lay-by is going to discourage bikers from staying on the road when they see a tractor trailer there. Nobody wants to be caught in a potential sandwich situation. The perception of a lack of safety damages walkability and it damages biking. This is documented. You can say that it's just as safe, but if it is perceived as less than safe, people avoid doing it. It's simple psychology, and we're trying to encourage walkability in our community. Less walking, less biking, it's going to be more traffic, it's going to damage communities, it's going to damage commerce. I also want to point out that it happens to be a very long block. And long blocks, more than 150 feet, encourage jaywalking, as we all know from traffic and pedestrian studies. What we need to be doing is creating even another place to cross and not making it even more hazardous for people to cross mid-block, because there will be jaywalkers still coming out of this new development. And another point is that the developer has done nothing to create any kind of pedestrian access from Columbia Avenue up through into the facility. And the more of those kinds of, whatever you want to call them, snickets, or that little paths that pedestrians can find to make their journey interesting, making those ways, those pathways, encourages people to stay on their feet.
Roger, I think.
Thank you.
it's
That's
really-
it. I'll stop there.
You can come and
I
sign up
was
again.
over time. I'm so sorry. Okay, appreciate it. I was
can-
waiting for a buzzer.
You can come, we're gonna, I think we'll start using a buzzer.
Yeah.
But,
I
yeah.
thought you were giving me the dimensions of the public area.
Nice try. Here we go. All right, we'd love to hear from you, Colleen. And the next person up after that is Rick Weiss, and then Bern Kelly.
Well, thank you very much for being here tonight. Really appreciate that. And thanks to the fire department and everyone coming out. One of my real concerns is that this is a wonderful opportunity, but the public is missing the traffic studies that the council directed the developer to do as something that would inform the site plan, and that the city itself was doing an independent traffic study. It's very fuzzy what the status of those studies is, but they have not been released. The council also had a resolution that the public was supposed to have time for adequate review of those traffic studies before any decisions are made. At this point, we've heard that the studies will not be discussed publicly until April 25th, and no one has actually said, and by the way, we will release those studies. So it's unclear whether the developer is now talking about particular results of traffic studies privately with the city or not. But that is the context. Those traffic studies are the environmental context for this development. And for us to have a draft site plan without the environmental context clarified and something that we can all look at and talk about, it just seems it was really premature to have that site plan, that draft site plan presented. And it certainly will be a rushed thing if we don't actually have a chance to talk about it until April 25th. So, and the one thing in looking at the draft site plan, I live about a mile away. I often walk. My husband and I walk tonight. I have a cart I bought, little old lady grocery cart so that I can get my groceries. But for big shops, I drive. So I know coming in and out of that drive, the parking lot, I always think of Tennessee Williams and Streetcar Named Desire. You rely on the kindness of strangers. And the other thing is that, not only can you not really see the traffic coming from the right, but there's a lot of pedestrians already. And you have to really be careful not to hit pedestrians getting on and off the bus, hurrying to the bus. And that's the last thing that I wanted to bring up is, as far as I can tell with the draft site plan, there is no bus stop. And that's an example of the problem that has not yet been solved with traffic. And so, what they've said is that they're working on it. But that's a big problem. And it's an example, I think, of that this development is just not in the scale that the environment will handle there. Thank you.
Rick, and then Bern, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Rick Weiss. I live on Pine Ave, not far from here. Thank you for coming. Thanks for your service as government officials. I think you'd find in this room and in Takoma Park there's a lot of people who have worked in government or do work in government at some level. We know what it's like. It's hard. Thank you for taking it on. I, for one, am one who is in favor of developing the parcel of land that we're talking about. I think nobody really wants a big empty parking lot in the middle of their town. But as I think you're well aware, you've heard there's a lot of dispute in this town about how to do that development. We recognize in this room, and I think in this community, that many of the reasons for the unhappiness about the development as it's been put out so far Things like the way it has creeped upward in scale from the original community wishes, and that there's not the green space that there originally was, and so on, are not relevant to your mission and not really for the discussion tonight. That's between us and haggling it out with City Council. But all those things become relevant when those kinds of changes compromise issues of traffic and safety, which is why we're addressing you tonight. And that's exactly what's happened here. So two major examples. One is that a smaller footprint for this development, or a differently designed footprint for this development, might have allowed for ingress and egress from this parking garage in a way that is far less fraught. But right now, the way it's laid out, if you imagine trying to come out of that driveway and making a left on Carroll to go west on 410, or to continue down Carroll, as has been mentioned, with cars backed up at that traffic light, with cars backed up all the way to Columbia, as they just were when I was walking here coming west to east, you're never going to get out of there. If you do, you're going to do it in a crazy way. And instead, maybe you're going to make a right to go with the flow in your own lane, and then circle around and cut through a bunch of small streets, including Columbia, which has been mentioned. If you haven't walked or driven Columbia, you need to do it. It snakes around like this. It's got one side of parking. You cannot see who's coming, and it's a crazy street to increase traffic flow on. So Sycamore and Columbia are really at risk with this thing. An even more egregious example of bad planning is this lay-by, which is terrible. Because the planners were not willing to give up footage for the development to allow for deliveries and garbage pickup and recycling in the back, as has always been the case here, and just frankly, for pure aesthetics, is what supposedly communities are moving towards. The idea of having your parking lots in the front and on the street is kind of 1950s. But anyway, just from a safety point of view, we now have a lay-by with trucks unloading across the pedestrian walks, buses stuck behind trucks, cars scooting around to get by, bicycle lane obstructed, line of sight obstructed, in an area with multiple crosswalks, kids, and so on. Look, the final point I want to make is that this might be a small development on the scale of things the state deals with. I recognize that. This is like a rounding error in your responsibilities, and we're almost sorry to have to drag you into this. But you have to recognize, and I'm sure you do or you will, that in a small community, small imperfections make a big difference. And these are not even small imperfections, but we're talking about a major depreciation in the quality of life for us. We have a chance to do this differently, and you guys, for better or worse, are in a position to be able to insist that it be done differently. If you say it needs to be safer, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and make it safer. If you say it has to be done better, for one way or another, they're going to have to go back and design something that's better. We're asking you to please pay attention to the details here the way you would in your own neighborhood. Please look at the details. Don't treat this like a small community that you can just sort of get by. It really matters to us, and you have an opportunity to help us. We're counting on you. We're asking you not to take sides, not to be pro-development or anti-development. Make it safe and make it better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Byrne is up, and then Karen Lovejoy, and then Colleen Scott.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for everybody for coming, especially State Highway. I am a landscape architect, site planner. I've worked with Dewberry and Bendire. I've even the widening of Kenilworth Avenue in front of District 3 for the new expansion of USDA and Sunnyside. I worked on that project. And I'm on the Purple Line Master Plan Advisory Group. I was tasked to present some technical things about road you just heard about, Columbia. If the developers or if the people elect to take right turns to get out because they can't make that horrible left with no sight lines, we don't have separation distances of hundreds of feet as required between major egress and ingresses in this intersection. It's two state highways. It's a failed state now, and in terms of your modeling, it fails at rush hours. The stacking, there isn't length for enough stacking. You saw the video, you saw the actual facts. If you turn right onto Columbia, you have, I drive an F-250. You have a 14-foot width with my mirrors on Columbia. Fire department can't take a ladder truck through there. The pumpers can just make it. I've watched the pumpers go through our streets. They've taken out fences on corners. It is not a good situation. We still have the ambulances going to We still have the ambulances. Sorry, I'm not trying to out you. We still have the ambulances coming and going to Sabate Adventist Hospital. We have a 15-degree incline at Columbia and Sycamore. The sight lines, if you're in a Prius, you can't see a thing. Okay, up in my truck, I can see something. But there is no leveling at that intersection, okay? The slope goes right up to the top. You've got people on Sycamore, you got the stack, the light only is like enough time for 4 cars to make a left turn. And you saw sometimes there's a bus or a truck where they're trying to make the left turn. So it's very difficult and it fails. So as a planner, I thought outside the box. I designed a traffic circle. I wanted people to look at the idea of a traffic circle. That may not be a perfect one, but this would be a regulated traffic circle. This would be with lights to phase the traffic so people, if we did have a right turn only, would have a way to make their left and come back by coming around the circle and not cut through the neighborhoods. So that is an outside of the box proposal solution. It involves moving, ironically, a gas station that is a historic building, and I put it in the middle of the circle. It has a mural too. So there's some technical difficulties. But we want to preserve the historic building if we can go to this, and I would like to see modeling of this, because no one else is offering out of the box or the square solutions that we're stuck with. And we all know it's not safe. It's just dangerous. It's a dangerous place. There are kids and crossing guards, and if you talk to those crossing guards, you'll wonder how they stay alive. So I thank you, and I hope you will consider that it's a failed intersection and the development should not go forward, and we don't want to get into the environmental impacts, but the air quality and the heat sink that's happening from lay-bys and congestion is something that goes against our air quality standards, and bad air makes for unclean water, and you know how it all works. Thank you.
Great. We've got Karen Lovejoy, and then Colleen Scott, and Denny May. And we do have a mic on this side, too.
Yeah, we don't want their necks to get sore here.
And after Karen is Colleen Scott. We can get ready, and then after Colleen is Denny.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I came basically because I don't even remember when I did it, but a few months ago I interviewed 2 individuals that wanted to remain nameless simply because they didn't feel that their employer would necessarily approve of their speaking. They work in the area. They are there in the area in front of the co-op, you know, on either side of that. I don't want to name the place, but they are there Monday through Friday. They were very willing to speak to me. One of them is a Takoma Park resident, and they are very invested and very concerned about this because daily, in the morning, and as far as that, they looked at the plans and they thought that the lay-by was utterly absurd. In their words, they told me that in the morning they see as many as 5 trucks parking and loading goods at the co-op. And this is on a regular basis. This is not just occasionally. And they just did not feel that a lay-by would come close to working. One of the things that they were concerned about is the foot traffic, and it's particularly the children that are daily coming to and from school in that area. They talked about precarious situations involving those children, and they're quite concerned. They have seen problems with older people who are not quite as agile trying to cross the varying crosswalks, who, you know, it was just, in their words, a very dicey situation. One of the workers worked, she told me that she used to park on the co-op parking lot, and she stopped because she almost had an accident coming out, as the guys have people have described. She almost had an accident trying to leave the parking lot. And people have talked about the dangers of making a left turn. I shop at the co-op, I park in that lot, and I'm trying to make a right turn, and I can barely. I mean, yeah, it's what is it, the good graces of strangers? It's in the hour that I stood there, I observed a near accident for someone trying to, it was a very close call. So there's no doubt that this development, as presented and as structured, they need to go back to the drawing board, because what is presented is just very flawed from a lot of different angles, and safety is surely one of them.
Thank you, Karen. Colleen Scott. And then after Colleen will be Denny May, and then Lycia Merriman and Kathleen O'Neill are up after that.
Hi, good evening. My name is Colleen Scott. I work with the co-op as a project and development manager. Okay. Increased traffic congestion in Takoma Park poses a threat to the viability of the Takoma Park Silver Spring Food Co-op. The traffic in Takoma Junction will impact the co-op more than any other business or establishment. It will also impact the lives of our members, our suppliers, and our staff. We have yet to see any traffic study or traffic counts, as others have mentioned, yet the development project seems to be moving forward. Last night, the plans were presented, and we're wondering how they got this far down the path without knowing where the bus stops, the traffic lights, the utility poles, and the crosswalks go. Others have already demonstrated the safety issues. The co-op previously expressed concerns about the lay-by concept. Our deliveries and trash removal occur 7 days a week, and they're often at unpredictable times. The new retailers and restaurants that are going into this proposed development will face similar challenges. The lack of a true loading dock and trash area inside the building footprint is, we believe, a penny wise and pound foolish decision. It will push all of the activities onto a main thoroughfare adjacent to buses, cars, trucks, and pedestrians. Our inventory turns over every 10 days, which means a lot of deliveries and a lot of different trucks. The drivers who deliver the goods come from surrounding states. Some of our largest deliveries come directly from York, Pennsylvania, and that will be the same for other restaurants and businesses as well. The drivers have schedules to meet, and they have told us they will not circle, they will double park. So that's what they do downtown. It's easier to get a ticket and worry about it later than to get off schedule. The proposed loading-unloading path from the back end of an 18-wheeler into the co-op is 3 times the current travel distance and almost the length of a football field. The increased travel path is through pedestrians as well, and it's going to take a lot longer to load and unload. So all of the delivery processes will be longer than we're currently experiencing, and that would be the same for anybody else going into the proposed development. The current parking count is 55 spaces, and the new parking count is 72 spaces, but that's like comparing apples and oranges. We think there's rarely more than a dozen cars parked in the lot right now, and a lot of the people that are parking there are co-op staff who they go in and out once, as opposed to if you're going to shop or going to eat. We believe the turnover, and that's part of why we're looking for the traffic study to see what the counts are. We also have serious concerns about the 4-way access to the driveway that others have talked about with the left turns and traffic backing up and sight lines. The ease of access to the co-op's parking areas is one of the reasons it's a desirable place to shop. Anybody who has been to Whole Foods in Silver Spring or Trader Joe's on Colesville Road knows how horrible it is to get into and out of those parking lots. The proposed garage access for the new development, we believe, is worse. There is no light at the entry and exit ramp, so we're envisioning gridlock through pedestrians. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. If people are interested, there's a few seats up in the middle here. If anybody wants to sneak in, maybe a couple seats in the back if anybody wants to sit down while Denny May is coming up to the mic, and Lucia Merriman and Kathleen O'Neill are next, and then Susan Schreiber after that. And if anybody who entered would like to speak, please come on up and let me put your name on the list. Here we have one more.
Yes, good evening. My name is Denny May. I'm a senior citizen who walks to the co-op at least once a day and have for years. I cross Carroll Avenue at the Philadelphia crosswalk and walk from the fire station to the co-op. I'll try not to repeat, much of what I wrote down has already been said. I'll try not to repeat that, but I will say that crossing in front of the exiting traffic there is already a problem. I cross that every single day, and I have almost been hit a number of times with distracted drivers trying to figure out how they're going to turn left or turn right into that intersection. I've had to wave and yell to make them realize that I'm there. I think it will be much worse with this development, with more traffic coming out of that ramp, and drivers unable to get a clear sight line left or right, down Carroll or back up Carroll, because of what's going on there. So I'm really, really worried about this proposed development being a serious hazard to pedestrians like myself who use that sidewalk. I have also been concerned about the lay-by. So rather than just try to imagine what the problems might be, I went and talked to a number of the drivers who come in there. And the unanimous response I got when I asked them, what are you going to do if we have a lay-by and the lay-by is blocked for some reason? Every one of them told me the same thing. We're not going to drive around in circles. We will pull up in front of the co-op, we will double park, and we will unload our truck. Now, that's illegal, but that's what they said they would do. I think these are good guys, but they have a job to do, and they can't be driving around all day waiting for a spot in the lay-by. I then followed a couple of them into D.C. after they, just to see, what happened. And it was unbelievable. They told me the truth. I saw them double park. I saw them double park in one of two lanes on Georgia Avenue during rush hour. Then I saw another one in Mount Pleasant double park next to a parking hydrant on a corner, blocking traffic to do the. So the lay-by. I am really worried about Ubers and taxis and bikes and all kinds, and people dropping off their passengers in front of this development and clogging up the lay-by, and the trucks not being able to get in there, and then all this other stuff could happen. It just doesn't seem to be a safe and workable arrangement. And then finally, it seems to me that the problem, based on what I have seen at the junction, the problem at the junction is volume of traffic. It's not timing of the lights. If timing of the lights was the solution, as Sue Katz-Miller said, this would have been solved years ago. This is the problem, I think, as an amateur traffic observer. Not too many cars and not enough space. So I don't think time lights is the solution. I will say that the citizens of Takoma Park have been asking for a traffic study of this junction for many years. And now that our taxpayer money has finally produced one, our city council will not make that study available until 2 weeks before they vote on this development. I find that incomprehensible. It makes me wonder, are they hiding something? What are they afraid of? We are depending on you to place the safety of our community first and try to encourage the city council to slow down this process and let us examine the traffic study. Thank you.
So Licia and Kathleen, you're up, and then Susan Schreiber's next, and then Eleanor Carlo after that. So Susan and Eleanor can be on deck.
Is it possible to get that slide that was first up?
Emily, can you give it a shot? Did you want the video?
Just the first slide when we
picture of the
walked
bus
in.
there? Okay.
Yeah.
I could probably just do it against the wall.
Hi, I'm Kathleen O'Neill. I live on Poplar Avenue, a couple hundred feet from the back of the site that will be developed. And my son is a kindergartner at Takoma Park Elementary School, and I'm a member of the PTA. And Alyssa and I are here to speak about the children's concerns walking to school.
Licia.
Oh, sorry, Licia.
So we have concerns about other side streets, but I'm going to focus mostly on the crosswalk here across Ethan Allen, because this is where the children are all funneled right now, since the second crosswalk at Grant is not yet functional. We are going to talk about the concerns we see right now. We don't have enough information on what's going to happen when the traffic's increased. We can just only assume it will get worse. The things that I see when my son and I walk to school is cars getting either confused or in a hurry. And there are two lights here, one in front of the bus and one back where the white car is waiting. And cars regularly, yeah, and the cars that are supposed to wait at the line where the white car is regularly go through that red light, because the second light where the bus is green. And they assume that either they don't see the red light, or they assume that they can get away with it, and they run the first red light and go through the intersection. And I have seen several times when they endanger children that are already crossing the crosswalk. The crossing guards, fortunately, are there to intervene, and often with their whistles they can get the cars to stop in time. But it's only a matter of time, I think, before someone's going to get hit, because I don't know what exactly is going on with the drivers. Similarly, as a driver, when I'm coming out of Sycamore, which is just at the back of where the bus is, there are cars who don't wait when that light turns green for those cars on Sycamore. They continue on into the intersection, and so I've almost been hit from the right side from cars coming through there. So this double light system, perhaps it's a visibility issue, I'm not sure, but it's creating a real problem. Hopefully when the children can cross at Grant, that might improve because they'll be farther away from this. The second problem with this intersection is the co-op entrance. The people turning in and out of it, like people said, they have trouble getting around the traffic, especially people turning left from Ethan Allen into here, the westbound traffic. And so they're not looking for pedestrians. There's a corner right there. People go to walking down Sycamore.
This is a crosswalk right here, but this is also the entrance into the co-op.
Alicia is showing that people, and especially it's a problem when people don't respect the one way and come out that way.
Yeah.
So those are some of the main things I've seen that I think are a hazard. Go ahead.
This is Sycamore here.
Hi, I have a child at Takoma Park Elementary School, a first grader, and I have a fourth grader at Piney Branch Elementary School, and I just want to thank you guys so much for coming out. So I've been walking, my husband and I are fortunate to walk our kids to school and then walk them home every day. I am a shepherd of children, and we're really fortunate. We have a Safe Routes program, and so a lot of us are able to walk our kids to school. And the main way that people funnel is they'll come down Ethan Allen, which I think another neighbor is going to talk about, between Woodland and Sycamore, but everyone from like Elm and Poplar, Hickory, they all come up to the top of Sycamore. And crossing that street, if you're crossing Sycamore, at the top of Sycamore in the morning, it's okay because you're coming this way. But in the afternoon, kids are crossing here, and they're coming across the co-op parking lot. I have grabbed my son as someone was backing into him. I've grabbed my son as someone's backing, that's okay. As someone was backing into him. This entryway to the co-op parking lot is problematic because kids perceive it as a continuation of a sidewalk. When you get here, you take a right. The majority of the kids take a right here. Or they walk across the street at the top of Sycamore, and cars are turning right, and the kids are not looking behind them.
And there's no crosswalk there, and there's no signal for the pedestrians, so they're not aware of when the signal will change for Sycamore, which is another issue.
Yes, so I have grabbed many kids, and also there's a backup sometimes of cars turning left into the entrance there of the Sycamore co-op parking lot. I also just want to say that I feel hesitant to say this, but I have a lot of my friends are parents that I school with, and they are not opposed to the development. And I'm saying this because, and I'm nervous, my heart's racing, I'm looking at Fred and everything, but the reason that that they haven't emailed the council and there's not because they don't care. They really don't. They just don't really worry about it. They worry about other issues, so there's a very vocal group. And I just need to state that because they're all here. The junction, everyone who's part of that is here represented, and a lot of my friends in Takoma Park aren't represented. What we all care about is safety in the junction, though.
Thank you, it's great.
Thank you. We've got Susan Schreiber, Eleanor Curlow, and then Ed Muller and Yaron Simititsky.
Hi, I'm Susan Schreiber. I live on Willow Avenue with my son and my 5-year-old granddaughter, who fortunately will not have to cross in order to go to Takoma Elementary next fall. And I've been part of this loose swarm, Community Vision for Takoma Junction, and over the last couple of weeks, I have read emails, public comments that have been sent to the mayor and council over the last 2 years. There were a lot that go back earlier than that, if you've been around and know the progression of things. But over the last 2 years, over 150 people have written to the mayor and council about concerns, about support for the development, about traffic, about the importance of saving the co-op, a whole range. But I would say that many, many, many of them talk about traffic issues and how important that is. I was going to give you several quotations, but a lot of them have been covered. A lot of people talk about school children crossing. A couple of people refer to the crossing guards as angels, as champions for their kids, and feel that they have really saved kids, pedestrians from serious accidents. But I'll just mention a couple of other things. Someone who has business right next door, my shop faces Carroll Avenue, so for 7 hours a day, I watch the traffic ebb and flow in front of me. Frankly, I seriously doubt that the lay-by will enhance the situation. During rush hour, the traffic backs up for blocks. And what happens if the fire truck or ambulance needs to access Carroll Avenue and it's clogged with traffic? Are you willing to risk that? Somebody else points out something, and this is about the increased congestion of people coming through Takoma Park to get to work, back and forth from work or wherever they're going. Carroll Avenue is already over-congested from the metro through the center of Old Town and through Takoma Junction. We have 18-wheeler tractor trailers on our streets every day as it is. Why would we want to add to that? Because of the congestion, GPS systems now reroute traffic through our neighborhoods. Like all of our neighborhood streets in and around Old Town and the Junction, Pine Avenue, where I live, has become a major artery to bypass Carroll Avenue, and the posted speed limits are ignored. Somebody quotes our, I've got 30 seconds. Okay. Somebody quotes our fire chief, Chief Musgrove, who testified in front of the council a while back on saying that the front-facing loading dock would create significant issues regarding pedestrian safety with tractor trailers not only parked on the street but also, well, I'll just go ahead here and say. Additionally, he warned that we're constantly blocked right now at the fire station trying to exit. We have lights controlled there, but we have a major issue often. My concern is putting a tractor trailer along there is going to increase our inability to come out and provide the necessary protection to our citizens of Takoma Park. Thank you.
Great. Eleanor? And we have a lot of growing population of families with kids. We have a new Montessori school right across the street on the junction. This co-op still is so important to us. We walk there, and the co-op doesn't seem to be getting much in this development, and it's losing its loading zone and its trash zone. So here's where it becomes a traffic issue. We know the loading zone is at a crosswalk, the lay-by. We know the problems with the lay-by. I just can't see that trucks will be able to see the pedestrians, the kids, elderly and their walkers. We have a lot of elderly who go to the co-op from the tower in their walkers. My 91-year-old friend couldn't be here today, but I know she's here in spirit. And the traffic continues to get backed up and congested.
I'm very worried about the fire department, because if there's 3 18-wheelers, and there's a fire and the trucks need to get out, how are they going to get out? So, and I also just have one question about the tenants and the people who will be in the cafes and the young folks. Everybody will be looking at 18-wheelers lined up, listening to revving motors, smelling the odors, and I think that as the state highway folks, you may want to take a look at that. Finally, you may want to suggest that the development be done in cooperation with the co-op, because I think the co-op may have a solution in this, that if it's expanded, if there's a second floor put on, and the traffic, the loading could be on the side, and the folks who use the co-op can park underneath, then we could put the loading zone on the side, co-op shoppers could walk and park in the underground spaces. So I think we may be getting there, but we're not there yet. Thank you.
Great. We've got Ed Muller and Yaron Simititsky. Hope I didn't pronounce your name too badly. And then on deck is Alice Sims and Lee Peterson and Jeremy Walls.
Hello, my name is Ed Muller. I live in Washington County. I began my business in Takoma Park 25 years ago, and we've been dealing with the co-op since they were on Sligo Avenue. And I'm one of those truck drivers you guys were hearing about. And I will plead the fifth on actually double parking, because I don't implicate myself in any way, but we come 4 o'clock in the morning, we wake up to get down here early enough in the DC area to be able to make deliveries. I'm not typical. I mean, I am typical of all the drivers that come down. They get up early, and they're not going to wait. And I know it. I see it in DC, as man spoke before. This lay-by is not going to work. It's tough enough to get in the parking lot as it is, even with a refrigerated box truck that we have. Tractor trailers, I see how they struggle to get in and out. The other thing is, when you're in a truck, you're up high. You don't see children. You do not see people. You know, you can see tall people, but you can't see short people. People really got to take that into account. And I see it all the time when I'm making deliveries. People crossing the street, you know, you try to make, as it is now, without the added volume that you're expecting. So to me, it makes no sense to do what they're talking about doing. I live in Washington County. When I make any kind of, if I want to expand my office, I have to get a traffic study on the road in the middle of nowhere to make sure. That's the first thing they do, is they look at the traffic, they look at adequate facilities to make sure the road is big enough. And I can't understand how they could talk about doing something like this, but that's not my decision, but I'll leave you go.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yaron. I am the owner of a small food company right here in Takoma Park, and I've been a member of the co-op for the last 33 years. And now I'm serving the co-op, making deliveries there 3 times a week. And on top of it, maybe another stop or 2 to pick up bulk items that I purchase from the co-op. And just like Ed said, we have a tight schedule, and there's, you know, to me, it's like unacceptable to come to any customer that I have and get in line behind several vehicles waiting to unload, and because we just have to keep on going. So definitely we're going to find some kind of way, legal or illegal, to complete our task. And also, I think, you know, as a member of the co-op, I'm concerned for the well-being of the co-op, and I just don't think this whole plan is good. And I hope it gets scrapped or going back to the drawing board to make it workable. And I hope you all take it into consideration. Thank you.
All right, we've got Alice Lee Peterson. Go ahead, Alice. Lee's next.
I'm Alice Sims. Thank you all for being here. It seems to be moving very fast, this project, to me. I live at 7109 Carroll Avenue, where the kangaroo and the rhinoceros are. And I would like to be 90. Someone mentioned that. I would like to be 90 and living in Takoma Park. But as it is, we don't go anywhere during rush hour. We just try to plan things so we don't go. Carroll Avenue is backed up, sometimes more and less from the fire station downtown. Also in the morning, to go down 410, there's the crossing guards for the children, which should be there, but that's backed up also, way backed up to almost to the fire station. And then to go through those double lights where Carol comes in and Ethan Allen comes in, it's already a mess, you know. I go to the co-op. I like the co-op. I can walk to the co-op sometimes, but I'll make this short. I just don't see how we can do any more traffic. It's already pretty snarly. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Lee Peterson. I live over in Ward 2. I use the co-op in that area, dry cleaning at least weekly. And I'm just glad you're here. Thank you. Thank you for hosting us. We have a problem just with the condition we're in now. And I understand the project with developing the lot is helping to drive a study that you all will be doing eventually, but we need the results of the study before the development is approved. So we really need your help. That's right. Thank you.
Great. So moving right along, we have Leslie Malofsky, Jeremy Wells, and Sally Kern. Those are the next three people. Feel free to come up and get ready.
Hi, I'm Leslie Malofsky. I live over on Flower Avenue. I'm the parent of the 8-year-old that just left and is hopefully safe outside. I have been frightened ever since he was born in parking lots because I'm worried about cars parking out or pulling out, just like Ed was saying, and not having the visibility to see him because he's small. And you know, there's the bikes, there's the scooters. Now he's got Heelys. I told him he could do his Heelys in here to show you all what it looks like when a little boy is not on his feet, but he's on wheels. And they're daredevils. So the whole parking or the whole traffic thing is really concerning to parents of young children. I bring a perspective to this that is fairly unique in that 35 years ago at that intersection, a very close friend of mine was the second car behind a bus, a Metro bus. I don't even know where the co-op is now, 35 years ago. But she watched, something was there though.
Turner Electric.
Okay, so she was at that intersection and nobody's really addressing the level of agitation of the drivers when they're waiting. We're talking about our agitation as people in the neighborhood and parents and utilizers of the co-op. But she watched a car pull out and zip around a bus and strike a young boy who was crossing in the crosswalk. His mother was behind him, but that car couldn't see him. And it's very similar, you know, to the first image, the video, to this image. You know, the child was walking here and the car was pulling out, just like we saw. So, and that was, if my memory serves, it was a long time ago, but that was a fatal accident. And the parent was with him. So you can only imagine with the cars zooming around the 18-wheelers that are unloading their goods. The other thing that occurred to me when Sue Katzmiller was talking that might be worth mentioning as well is I had an accident myself when I was maybe 10, 15 years ago. I was in front of a fire station on Georgia waiting to execute a left turn onto Sligo Avenue, and the fire station needed to come out, and they changed the light because they have the possibility to do that when they need to pull the fire trucks out. And a commercial vehicle wasn't paying attention. They ignored the red light, and I was executing my turn, and they broadsided me. And I was seriously injured. I have a 16% limitation with turning my neck. Had a very bad concussion. They totaled my car. And so that's just to say, I don't know how the lights will work, but with the congestion we have now and the congestion we foresee, the need for the fire station to do their job, you know, it's going to be more complicated.
Okay, we have Jeremy Wells, Sally Kern, Karen Anderson. Jeremy, then you, Sally.
Jeremy Wells, recent property owner here in Takoma Park. My wife and I recently bought a house on Birch Avenue, and so I'm a bit of an outsider coming into the controversy here. I want to make it clear that I very much support the idea that the development, I like the idea of development, generally speaking, but I do think it needs to be pedestrian focused. I think one of the reasons why my wife and I decided to buy here and why we want our 2 4-year-olds to live here is because of the pedestrian-oriented qualities of Takoma Park. And that is incredibly important to us. And I do realize that often transportation agencies focus on efficiency with automobile transportation. But I would suggest focus on efficiency or the quality of a focus on pedestrian quality transportation and bikes and making the cars second-class citizens. That's so important to the quality of what I think is really important to the One thing I want to just make a sort of a side comment, because I realize that the state's not really involved in this, but I find it surprising the lack of transparency that appears to be, and I don't know, this is second information, of the discussions that are happening at the city level in terms of not having some of this information available. I don't know to what extent that's true. I do know that this is a unique situation where the city has some leverage over the kind of development that happens. That's typically not the case when a city just has to follow regulations. And a private developer, as long as they're doing what they should do under the regulations, they can do whatever they want. Extending that, I would also extend a concern over transparency at the state level, in that I really think it's important to recognize that Takoma Junction is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, and that means additional environmental review that should be happening, both from Section 106, which is a federal requirement, and the Maryland Historical Trust Act, which is an equivalent regulation. But what that means is additional citizen involvement that's required. It's consultation. It's not simply 3 minutes to speak your mind. It's a lot more time that officials have to actually engage with you more as an equal. Really, really important. I'd also throw out that if there's federal funding that's going to be involved in any of the transportation that's happening in the changes, Section 4F would also come into play. And I'd really like to see from the state's point of view, please be very transparent about that, make it really easy for anybody here to become consulting parties to that. Really, really important. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Sally and then Karen Anderson, and then we'll hear from the fire chief.
Okay, my name's Sally Kern, and I live on Woodland Avenue, which is the street one street east of Sycamore. And thank you for being here. I'm so excited to be able to speak one-on-one with you. I live on Woodland, and I'm going to raise one personal issue about Woodland. Right now, I live at the top of Woodland. After living at the bottom of the Woodland for 10 years, we moved to the top of the Woodland for 10 years. So you cannot make a left on Woodland, despite the fact that there's a tiny little sign as you're coming west on Ethan Allen. There's a sign that says, whatever it says, it says stop for, you know, you're supposed to have egress from Woodland to go towards to the west. I would say 1 out of every 500 cars might stop at that point. Maybe. Anyway, the sign is tiny, it's always overgrown with vegetation, and I would like to know why there's no white line to encourage people more to stop. Okay, so that's a problem now, and it's going to get worse as time goes on. I'm concerned about the new development being sized for urban downtown. I think it's oversized in terms of the size. It's not a neighborhood-sized development, and so I think it's going to impact traffic, even make the bad situation even worse. So I think it's going to cause people to detour down Woodland and I guess Prince George's and the neighborhood around it. There's been talk about making Sycamore and Woodland one way, and I'm personally very against that, because right now there's no way I can get out the top of Woodland. But if you make Woodland one way down, that means everybody's got to go up Sycamore, and I've heard talk about making Sycamore one way down. And if you do that, there's no way out. We just can't get out of our neighborhood unless we go one way out the wrong way of the co-op parking lot. Okay, sorry. Okay, I actually would like to re-sign up again, or if you could give me a waiver. I know that's desperation, but I was the person, my son's a college freshman, and when he started kindergarten, I was fearing for his life. We had a walking school bus. And so I started a petition for the crossing guards. We got the crossing guards.
Thank you.
They slowed everything down. So you had the commuters petition the state highway to speed up the lights. And so then they shortened the lights. And so I had to start another petition to the state highway to lengthen the lights, and I was told, really, what you're supposed to do is walk from one light to walk across to the old Art Deco space, and then wait another round to go across. Well, there are 3 schools, and I would walk one kid to Takoma Elementary, and then one kid to Piney Branch. Anyway, 2 boys. There's a middle school. So I was crossing back and forth with a dog twice. Can I just beg you for another?
That's the fire.
It wasn't me, but we're going to grant you 1 more minute.
Okay, thank you. I know, I'm trying, I can, I'm ready to have a heart attack here. I hate public speaking. Anyway, so I would like to point out there are 3 schools. It's not just one. It's Takoma Elementary, Piney Branch, Takoma Middle.
And now Montessori.
Okay, Montessori. And then also I would like to point out it's not just when the crossing guards are there, but there's after-school activities, and then there's also the community center that has after-school programs, the Man Up, everything, the kids. Okay, so then, and we have the public library down there. Okay, so I wrote you and asked you, instead of the 2 crosswalks, could we just have the granite crosswalk? And at the time, you all said, it doesn't work, we already got the other crosswalks. Anyway, but I would also like to say, so I've said that, I attest to everything they've said. I used to be out there screaming. My kids used to say, please don't scream at the cars, Mom. Anyway, but, okay, another thing, I couldn't go to the meeting last night, but my husband said, there are no dumpsters. They haven't shown where the dumpster is going to be. So I guess the dumpsters, not just the trash trucks, but the dumpsters are going to be in the front too, and there's no, they haven't said where they're going to be the line of bikes. I forget what they're called. Anyway, so you got the city bikes, you got trash receptacles, you got the signs, you got the big overhanging traffic things. Anyway, there's lots of stuff that hasn't been accounted for. And let's just slow it all down and please look at everything. And if I could just say one more thing, which is off topic, Blair High School, which my younger son's at, the runners had to stop running across where you go onto the
The Beltway.
Yeah.
The vegetation's overhanging there, and I call all the time. They say, we'll have somebody take care of it. And they never do. So,
Thank you,
so
Sally.
anyway,
Thank you for standing up for all of us. I know you protected my daughter on more than one occasion.
let me
Thank you
just
so
tell
much.
you, I've got 3 more years
No,
until
we
my
don't.
other son goes to college. So
We'll vote
let's
for
just
you.
hope.
We'll vote for you. Thank you, Sally. The next person up is Karen Anderson, and then we'll hear from the fire chief, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people.
Karen left.
Karen left. Okay, we're going to skip Karen. The next person is the fire chief. We have been granted a few more minutes here, but we're going to ask people to try and be really concise with their thoughts.
I don't want to take that one.
Excellent. And after the chief, we'll hear from Bob Engelman and Jessica Landman if you want to get ready.
Well, I can see one thing right off the bat, that the traffic lights out front are a guideline for the people that drive these streets here, just like your 3-minute time limit is a guideline also. Hey, first of all, this is the first opportunity I've ever had to thank each and every one of you for the support that you give this fire department. You support us through the Christmas tree sales. You come in, you make donations. We're here for you always, and I thank you.
Where do you sell those Christmas trees, Chief? Where do you sell them?
We sell those at the co-op lot right up there. You have to ask yourself about a traffic study, and that probably won't win friends. A traffic study, a lot of times, they don't get released because they may not tell you exactly what you want to hear. We've heard a lot of things about the way they're going to load and offload up here. Ask yourself how these tractor and trailers are going to get here. Are we now going to increase the flow of tractor and trailers and large apparatus up and down Philadelphia Avenue through town to come up here and make this turn? My concern has always been, and as it was quoted before, I'm not really sure why I get to speak because everybody's done a great job for me. I ask you, have you ever seen a child struck? I have. If you have a problem up here, it's because we haven't done our job here today to make this a safe environment for the elderly, the children, the walkers, the bikers, and things like that. We need to do a better job here to be prepared for what lies ahead of us up here. Size of my fire trucks upstairs are about 31 feet long, a little over 8 feet wide. That's my engine. Our ladder trucks are much longer than that. We already have a problem right now with traffic congestion here in the morning and in the evening just getting out of this firehouse. Traffic lights, as I stated earlier, are guidelines for most of these people in Takoma Park and that drive through Takoma Park. If a light turns yellow, that means you go faster. And generally, what happens coming up Philadelphia Avenue, this light, they'll have it green, and the next 2 traffic lights down there are red. Therefore, they're stopping right in the turn. We also have a problem with buses that are stopped up here. The flow of traffic stops behind the buses. Going down towards town, the bus stop there, we also have the problem there. So we are constantly need to be aware of the traffic situations that we have to entail every day. Understand, the slower we get out of the fire department, this fire station, we're not able to do our jobs. Our job is to protect each and every one of you. When you dial 911, it's our responsibility to get there as fast as we possibly can. You don't have to flip me, I'm going.
That's great. So we've got Bob Engelman, Jessica Landman, Cynthia Marvell in that order.
I've lived in Takoma Park for 45 years now, off and on, but I lived on Boyd Avenue early on in Takoma Park in the mid-70s and have watched the Carroll Avenue traffic increase in that time. And It's given me at least a little bit of perspective on it. I think a fundamental truth about development that policymakers and developers often forget, but I think the State Highway Administration is very aware of, is that past and current development inexorably constrain future development. You cannot develop undeveloped land, and there are real limitations on what you can do. And it's maybe worth just stepping back for a second and thinking about our past development. Carroll Avenue and Ethan Avenue were old farm roads. They're among the oldest roads in our area. They go back to the tobacco farming era when enslaved people carried tobacco along them to eventually get to Bladensburg in Georgetown. And in those days, there was an estate, probably goes back to before the Revolution, that sits where Manor Circle is now. Ultimately, a Civil War general by the name of Samuel Carroll lived there, from the famous Maryland dynasty, the Carrolls, and after whom, of course, Carroll Avenue is named. And in those days, there was just simply a Y intersection, simply a divergence of two roads in farm country. It was not at that time a failed intersection. It was very easy to navigate that road at the time. But when Takoma Park developed in the late 19th and early 20th century, they brought, the town leaders at that time allowed what was a then typical development of small towns a good distance away from a city. And buildings were brought close to that road, which then subsequently became state highways. If this had happened 100 years later, the logical thing to have been doing to make this kind of development work by the co-op would be to widen the highway. Obviously, that's what typically is done in exurbs. And since you can't widen to the south because of the topography, that steep slope, you really need to widen to the north and eliminate houses, buildings that have existed for decades in that area. If the city could do that, you might be able to develop this space the way the city is thinking of doing it. But it can't do that. And so it has to understand that development is just simply constrained. You don't need a traffic study. Colleen Cordes and Sue Katz-Miller have talked about, and others have talked about the fact that we haven't seen the traffic study. This is the traffic study. We've been talking about a traffic study all evening. Do we really need to know much more about the traffic situation? There's an obvious chronology here. First, deal with a failed intersection that's already dangerous. If you can deal with that, once you've dealt with it, consider the possibility of how you might want to develop that land. But don't do it in reverse. That makes absolutely no sense. And where you all can help us is in basically making the kind of decisions that convince our city that that's what needs to be done. You can't help us decide whether we want a co-op or not. We obviously want a co-op. That's something the city has to decide. But you can convey the obvious lack of wisdom in doing development first and then worrying about how to fix an already failed intersection. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Jessica Landman, Cynthia Marvell, and then Tony Camilli.
Good evening.
We'll wrap up in about 5 minutes.
I'll be brief. Hi, I'm Jessica Landman. I'm a nearby resident. I'm a pedestrian customer of the co-op, and I'm a daily walker in the neighborhood, and I admit that I'm an occasional jaywalker in the neighborhood, partly because the lights around the co-op are so impossible for pedestrians to adhere to and make their way across. I don't want to talk any more than all of my neighbors have already about the substance today, but I just wanted to ask a process question. I know you're not here to talk in detail, but you mentioned at the very beginning that you review transportation impact statements and then offer options to communities. And I guess I have two questions for you. The first is, what's the normal time frame that you are given to review and comment? As a former government official, I know that something that would come across my desk, I would have some time to look at it, a reasonable amount of time to respond to it before action would be taken. And I'm concerned that the community is worried about our time to review the transportation study. Are you being given adequate time for the job that you need to do, or is that an issue that we need to take up with our city council? And the second question is, you mentioned that you offer options. My question is whether you have the power to accept or reject aspects of a plan in circumstances like this. So if those procedural questions are not out of order, Betsy, I'd love to hear the answer. Thank you.
We take 21 days as part of our process.
What was the second one?
Can you reject parts of the
You know, I don't want to comment on anything because I haven't seen it yet. You know, I certainly, we haven't seen the traffic impact study, has not been submitted to us at this point, so I don't want to be, I don't want to make a comment on whether we could, yeah, but thank you.
Is there an ability?
The question is whether you have the legal authority to reject that plan.
I don't know. I've never seen that happen. We work to find ways to mitigate any challenges that we would have.
Okay, thanks.
Did people hear that? The answer was that they work to mitigate any challenges that they find.
But that's very nebulous.
That's nebulous. Hold that thought, though.
The process for tonight that we did agree to, and these are understandable questions, was really a listening session. There is the opportunity to communicate, you know, in other forums, but you know, we've got some great note takers here trying to understand the situation. So we have what, 3 more speakers?
We have 4 more speakers. We've got Cynthia Marvell, Tony Camilli, Bobby Kittner, and Roger Slagle.
And we'll wrap with Roger.
And we're going to wrap after that.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Mariel. I live right near the junction, but what is critical tonight is for you to know that I'm a bus rider. I do not own a car. I walk through that intersection. I bicycle through that intersection. My life is in danger when I cycle or walk through that intersection. And I'm also in danger when I use the bus. You know why? Bus drivers are under pressure, just like car drivers when they come to that intersection. Bus drivers need to stay on time, on their schedules. They need to get me where I need to go on time. But they have to rush through that intersection, because if they don't make the light, they are behind schedule. And I get on that bus, I have my card out, ready to go, quickly pass through the toll, try to get to my seat, and sometimes I don't get to my seat before they're rushing, and I'm just kind of unstable because they have to make that light. And guess what? I still have a lot of vigor, but I own my home, I'm staying here, and I'm aging. And I also carry a lot of bags. This is not going to be a good community for me to age in unless traffic at this intersection is dealt with. And no assessment of safety at this intersection is complete unless bus riders, bus drivers, pedestrians and cyclists and crossing guards, mind you, have been directly and freely spoken to. Last week I was on the F4 bus, and there are 5 buses that come through this intersection. 5 different bus lines. And I just briefly updated the F4 bus driver. Do you know about this development? And I gave him a brief overview. I said, you know, they plan on having this lay-by underground space, parking spaces for 72 cars. I said, what do you think? How's that going to affect your job and the work you're trying to do for the people of this county and state? And he just sighed and shook his head. And he said, please tell the city not to do this. Because we haven't had a lot of accidents at this intersection does not mean we are a Vision Zero community that has had no accidents. You know what it means? We've just been lucky.
Thank you, Cynthia. We have Tony, and then Bobby, and then Roger, and then we'll wrap it.
Good evening. My name is Tony Camilli, and I live here in Takoma Park, and I want to thank you for coming out tonight, gentlemen, for listening to the community. I'm not here to talk about the merits of the development itself, but I do want to align myself with some comments that were stated earlier. I think that a lot of people in Takoma Park, myself included, moved here because we appreciate the human scale of the environment. And I consider myself a walker first, a bicyclist second, and a driver third. And Unfortunately, as everyone has pointed out here, and I'm not going to repeat it, the junction certainly was not designed in that order. It is a monstrosity of an intersection. Sort of the original sin was the design of the junction to begin with. If you consider the decision to connect two state highways like that, merge them in front of that, but we can't go back. We can't change that, right? Or could we? I'll just throw that in your minds to think about. I want to say something. Another speaker earlier said something that really jumped out at me as well. Is the intersection itself and the use of lights. This is an intersection that I think would benefit by maybe some unconventional thinking. And the speaker earlier talked about the use of roundabouts or traffic circles for the Americans. So I lived over in the UK for many years where roundabouts are common, they're everywhere. And the one thing I took notice of, and you probably are aware of this as people that work in the traffic business, is the great thing about roundabouts is it forces you to pay attention. If you see a light and it's green, the initial thought is step on the gas. When you come up to a roundabout, it's confusing. And confusion causes concern, and concern causes people to pay attention. So I just say that to think about that, throw that in your wheelhouse or toolkit to maybe consider the use of something unconventional like a roundabout. A couple other things I think I just want to point out that I think are useful. We heard about children and the dangers for a lot of kids who have to cross this intersection in order to get to all of our schools, which all happen to be on the north side of the intersection. I don't know if State Highway has ever considered it, but I certainly would be supportive of traffic cameras, whether they are red light cameras to catch people who are running red lights, and I would even support speed cameras there as well, because I have witnessed a lot of people speeding through that intersection. Again, sort of a byproduct of the green, yellow, red phenomenon we call traffic lights. And then the last thing that I'll mention before I get out of here is that something I realize I've been talked a lot about is that the intersection has pretty much zero design currently for the use of bicycling. You saw some pictures earlier that I think Betsy put up about what it's like to bicycle. I've bicycled through that intersection myself. I've bicycled all through DC a lot, and it's really a kind of a terrifying bicycle ride to be on the road. And then if you ride on the sidewalk, which I've done too, you kind of hate yourself for doing it because you're riding on the sidewalk and there's people coming, and then you have to get off your bike, and you don't want to get off your bike, and the whole thing is really uncomfortable. One suggestion to think about: let's decrease the lanes in there. Let's decrease the throughput from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, put some turn lanes in the middle, and then add some nice bike lanes so that we're presenting an intersection that's really multimodal. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Tony. We have Bobby Kittner, Mike Royce, and Roger Schlegel.
All right, I'm next, right? I'm Bobby Kittner. Thank you for coming. I live on Sycamore, and I'm a property owner, and I actually have a building on Carroll Avenue down in the Old Town area. And originally I wasn't going to talk tonight, but I just decided I needed to get up here and say something. I've lived here for 25 years, and this is the very first time that I'm hearing about a traffic study. So I'm assuming that we're not going to get another one for another 25 years, maybe.
We're not doing a traffic study.
You're not doing a traffic study? The city paid for one. Okay. So, all right. So anyway, I just want to say that with this traffic study that's going on, we need to make sure that we're not making it so easy for people to speed. I mean, super speeding isn't going to work. I have a 12-year-old kid that goes across that intersection on his own now because he's too cool for himself and doesn't like to go when the crossing guards are there. So I think it's really important to make this a walkable, easy to use situation, but I also think that that encourages people to go faster when you simplify an intersection. So I'm all for a roundabout. I just came back from Vancouver, and they have roundabouts everywhere, and people are stopping, and there's a lot of pedestrian traffic there and a lot of people on bicycles, and people are really actually aware of what's going on. And I do think that there is this situation that I've seen as a resident on Sycamore and walking that street. I try to walk like 3 miles a day,
and I often go up there, and it just seems like people are in their own zone when they're entering that intersection, and they've become familiar with it in a way that is scary. They make right-hand turns when the light is red and not looking to see who's going across the street or who's potentially coming there. But the bigger thing is that the trucks that are unfamiliar with the road, and they do enter that intersection, there's oftentimes speeding, they don't slow down, they're not looking to see what's what and what's going on. And I've seen bicyclists almost killed if they were struck by a big truck. And I've seen kids not look and not understand that this is a complicated intersection. So I'm really worried about that. And I just want this to be an ongoing process rather than waiting every 25 years for something. I think that would be really great. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. You have Mike Royst, and then we have Roger, and we'll close the day. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Mike Royst. I live on Park Avenue in Takoma Park. I am one of the few here tonight that fully support the redevelopment of Takoma Junction. I have 4 suggestions for the State Highway Administration. The first suggestion is to turn this intersection into an all-way pedestrian crossing. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's where all traffic is stopped at one time, and pedestrians from anywhere at that intersection can cross the intersection from one corner to any other corner. There's no movement of traffic when those cars are stopped. The first all-way pedestrian crossing I ever saw was in Denver, Colorado, more than 2 decades ago, so this is not something new. There is a large section of land on the east side of the intersection that could easily be removed to facilitate traffic flow. Sorry, Lorraine. But I'm about making this work. I grew up in California, and when there was a problem, they solved it. They made it work. I hope the State Highway Administration looks into the use of smart traffic lights, which could significantly facilitate traffic flow. And I'll suggest this, I don't know what your knowledge is, but if you need any help with that, Caltrans in California has lots of information on smart traffic lights. They've been using those successfully for quite some time. Don't forget the bicycle riders. And lastly, there's a Trader Joe's at 1914 14th Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., much larger than the co-op. They unload everything from the street. And I suggest people who don't believe that go there themselves and see it for themselves.
We don't want Georgia Avenue in Tacoma.
Well, I'm just saying it's possible to do. They don't have a lay-by. They park, the big trucks park in the parking lane. Right
Those
next
aren't
to the
state
curb.
highways either.
I'm just saying.
You all let him finish. Thank you.
Okay,
Fine.
so it is possible to make it work.
Yeah.
And that's all I have to say. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. All
I'll
right.
stand over here so you think I'm somebody else.
There you go.
Well, I wanted to see how it's closing it out. I wanted to say that I know Takoma Park has a reputation for getting all up in arms around things, and obviously you can imagine people get super organized around any issue. And so you may wonder, well, here we go, we went to Takoma Park. They've all organized themselves. They're going to have 101 reasons against something. But I wanted to just really emphasize that this is such a unique set of streets within the state highway system and the local grid. And it does go back to the fact that originally, prior to the 1930s, we just had a single road going out from the railroad station that branched into a Y here. And that it became necessary for the state, as the DC area grew, to find an east-west route that was close into the district line. And that east-west route consisted of extending Philadelphia Avenue down the hill to Piney Branch Road and then continuing it up. And what we ended up with was this weird crisscross of routes that share the same long block in the middle, and that's the exact block that we're concerned about right now. So please understand that we've inherited this remarkable problem, and it might be that we are as developed or close to as developed as we can be given what we've inherited and what we provide to the larger transportation infrastructure. But please trust us that we're out here talking about real issues that we've watched every day. So thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to encourage everyone. I want to, first of all, let's big round of applause and thank you for these three gentlemen who spent the evening with us. Really, thank you so much. And I want to reiterate what Sue Katz-Miller, our opening speaker, said, which is that you've heard a lot of heartfelt testimony. You probably hear this all over the state, but this is a very congested intersection. And we've heard about cars jumping around buses, about the lay-by blocking rescue vehicles, about trash trucks having nowhere to go, bike lanes missing, bus stop missing. So we just really do want you to pay attention to the details. So thank you very much for the notes you've taken and the listening you've done. And for the group that's here, this is the time to really stay engaged. We have a lot of meetings. There will be 2 traffic studies released April 25th.
No, they're going to be released before that.
Okay,
right.
good.
They will be released. We're actually putting out a statement tomorrow. They were delayed because of the weather, and NBC traffic study was delayed because of just some hiccups with getting the sign off from SHA. So things got delayed, but they will be out before the 25th.
Okay, in a letter we had, we're told the 25th, but we're glad it's coming out sooner because we do want to look at that. But there will be, check the schedule on the city's very good website about the Takoma Junction, about the many meetings that are coming up, the efforts to look at the development, the open houses, and stay engaged. We need donations. We have to rent this room. We have materials we've produced and equipment we've rented. So if you'd like to make a donation, it's all going to go to this effort to try to be thoughtful in our efforts to look at how we use this public land for the public good. Thank you so much for coming, and thanks to our guests.
I can make change.